So why is it this avoidant man who's over 40 won't chase me? What do I do about it? That's going to be our topic today. We're going to talk about love attachment styles, particularly the insecure attachment style of avoidant men, whether they're fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant. And certainly we'll talk about anxious as well. So here's a couple questions I want everyone to ponder for a moment. Why will an avoidant man end the relationship with me and end up with the very next person that they're in a relation, like they end up in a relationship with someone immediately right after our relationships end? That's one of the questions we're going to be exploring. Why won't an avoidant man invest emotionally in the relationship after physical intimacy? I'm sure you've experienced this where someone comes on strong and then from an emotional perspective, and then it literally fades away and they become emotionally constipated. And I'm with an emotionally avoidant man and I want more connection. What do I do about it? So these are some of the questions we're going to be exploring today. Now, before I get into this, I want to draw attention to the red pill community and the community that often talks about the sexual marketplace, whether you're listening to Sadie Kahn, who's a psychologist out there, whether you've watched the video of James Sexton and Orion Taraban. These are some people that overemphasize what I believe on some level, while there is truth or value to understanding it, I think the narrative is weak because it doesn't offer real, true solutions. Now, Orion Taraban claims that men have an identity crisis today because of the feminist movement. Okay. Let's explore that for just a quick second, because I think women standing up for themselves and not being dependent upon men is a radically great thing for women, but men as well. I'm sorry, it's just as valuable to men that women stand in their sovereignty, they stand in their power, they're not dependent upon men for their survival. And so they claim that this is the big problem. For James Sexton, he primarily talks about extremely wealthy men who give up their power to women basically because of physical intimacy. When I mean their power, they give up their financial resources from a very immature way. You know, he claims that these men are ultra confident in their professional life and they're absolutely rather doormats in their personal life, but that's another conversation as well. But why am I drawing attention to it? Because I believe the big problem in our dating marketplace, particularly for those of us in the over 40 crowd. Now, what makes the over 40 crowd so vastly different than those in their 20s and 30s? Because men and women in their 20s and 30s are primarily driven by their biology, by their imprinting, by the pheromones and hormones, more so from those of us that are in our 40s, 50s, 60s, and even 70s. See, what makes over 40 unique is that roughly about 75% of singles over 45 years old are divorced. And divorce comes with it not always come with it, a true emotional trauma. See, when I speak about childhood wounds and adult traumas, one of the most significant traumas that happens for those of us in midlife is relationships that don't work out. See, a relationship, and by the way, God forbid it's a treasured relationship that doesn't work out. A treasured relationship that ends can feel like a death. And there's a gigantic period of grieving that can happen that I think the dating conversation in the YouTube universe doesn't draw attention to the deep emotional effects that occur when a treasured relationship ends, or God forbid, a toxic relationship ends. See, I think that not enough attention is drawn to the emotional traumas that affect us through the dating process, this habitual dating process of over and over and over and over again kind of experiences. Because when I mean over and over again, I mean swiping, one date after another, that sort of thing. That's what I mean by this this merry-go-round that just happens in the meeting process. But more importantly, the ending of relationships. You know, the average person by the time they hit 50 or 60 have had 3 significant relationships in their life, including a marriage. And so when we talk about love attachment style, and if you're not familiar with the book, Wired for Love by Dr. Stan Tech, and I highly recommend getting this book. There'll be some other books I recommend. All the books I recommend are listed below under Jonathan Recommend Books in the show notes. Why you might want to read these books is to understand love attachment style, particularly in the secure and insecure fashion. And within the insecure is avoidance, which is fearful avoidant, dismissive avoidant, and within anxious, the other insecure is anxious. Basically, the way I encapsulate this, and I'm just going to give you my Cliff Note version of it, anxious people are rather needy or dependent for affection, and avoidant people tend to be, they get overwhelmed by basically little or a lot of affection in relationship. And they become very emotionally closed off, withdrawn, emotionally constipated. Actually, they have a difficult time expressing their emotions. And the dismissive avoidant, the fearful avoidant is afraid of love, and the dismissive avoidant actually tends to reject it to some degree. And why I think it's important to talk about this is even though attachment theory says that 50% of the population is secure, I think that's a complete mistake. I don't believe that. Now, that's just my supposition on my part. I just don't believe it. And I do believe men tend to be more avoidant than women, but I will tell you there's a significant percentage of women who are avoidant, just like there's a significant percentage of men who are anxious. See, the other problem with relationships, as I said, is the scripts we were raised with, particularly for those of us in our 40s, 50s, and even 60s, because we are part of the baby boom generation and the Gen X generation, where we had scripts that were predominantly patriarchal, if not misogynistic, these scripts, for the most part. What's fascinating to me is the red pill community and the community that talks about sexual marketplace wants to go back to an old traditional script because they claim that the feminist movement ruined the script because it's a very male-dominated script. Just because men in history have had the resources to provide for a relationship, that certainly has changed. And the other narrative that rarely ever gets discussed is the fact that we have a wounded population in the dating marketplace, an emotionally wounded population based on those factors I talked about, particularly at the ending of treasured relationships. You see, the red pill community wants society to go back to a transactional form of relationship. Now, in my mind, a transactional relationship basically covers these 3 primary points. It covers the practical aspects of living, whether that basically is your food, shelter, your basic necessities, and working together in some sort of teamwork type of fashion. But it's usually based on mutual exchange, oftentimes based on men are the providers of the financial resources and women are the containers for basically the household duties and physical intimacy. What was that Olivia Wilde movie that came out? Baby, or well, God, now it just escapes me. But it included Chris Pine and oh God, who's that singer? Henry. Anyway, very much a misogynistic, patriarchal point of view. I think a lot of the red pill community wants human beings to go back to this transactional, which is the practical component, the physical component, which is sex, and basically the entertainment one another, play and fun, entertainment of one another. That to me, and they're usually based on an exchange of duties. That's what makes it transactional. It's a basic exchange of duties. See, what a lot of these relationships are missing, and if you are following my channel, I suspect you are thirsty for 2 additional components of what you seek in a relationship. Those two additional components are an emotional connection with your partner. See, they've actually now come out with more love languages than the original 5 love languages. If you're not familiar with the book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, I want you to Google the 7 love languages, or I want you to Google the love languages, because now they've added the emotional connection to the love languages. I believe they've also added the intellectual component within a love language, something known as sapiosexual. I've done a video on this. You may want to Google it. It's called the 9 love languages. I've added a few more of my own love languages. So as soon as you wrap up this video, make a note right now to write down the 9 love languages. Go back and watch my video or listen to my podcast on this, because I think it's important to recognize that today, see, women initiate 75% of divorces. Do you know their primary reason why they initiate it? Because now the red pill community would say because they're stealing the man's resources. I'm going to share with you in a moment a woman who initiated a breakup and she forgo the resources component of it. But I'm here to say, while there's some temporary benefit if you're in a marriage to take advantage of someone else's resources, the primary reason why women initiate most of divorces, beside those women who have been unfaithful and want to take some man's resources, is that the relationship lacks a real emotional connection, but more importantly, a spiritual connection. There's something beyond themselves in this relationship. There's something deeper beyond themselves in this relationship. And if you're not familiar with the work of Gary Zukav, I highly recommend reading this book called Spiritual Partnership, A Journey to Authentic Power. And don't read this for yourself. Ladies, if you are having physical intimacy with a man, you should be reading these books together. Now, I say the word should. I'm encouraging you. Oh, by the way, the Harry Styles movie was Don't Worry, Baby. Someone just posted that. So thank you, Power of Chi, for letting me know. Not Harry Connick Jr., which was basically going back to what the red pill community wants to go back to. Okay, let me read. I just did a squirrel. Let's come back to spiritual partnership. I'm inviting you all of you ladies, and we're going to talk about this in slightly a little bit more detail in a moment, is to encourage or approach relationships from the perspective of emotional and spiritual as much as the practical, the physical, and the fun and entertainment of relationships. So I asked 3 questions at the beginning of this broadcast. I said, why will an avoidant man end a relationship with me and end up with the very next person? So avoidant men oftentimes operate from a codependent place. Avoidant men operate from a codependent place. They want companionship, connection, and they want sex from a transactional component, a dependent component. This is why they'll end a relationship and immediately end up with somebody else, because they fear being alone. They fear being alone. Now, they are completely fearful or dismissive of their emotions and their feelings. They're completely dismissive of it. But they fear being alone. Now, I have a new theory for avoidant, particularly fearful avoidance and anxious people. I believe if a fearful avoidant and an anxious person had a relatively good relationship, but it ended, here's my theory. The fearful avoidant heals within the relationship. They actually heal. They begin a healing process of healing the wound that caused them to be fearful avoidant. Okay. The problem is the anxious person doesn't begin healing the wound until after the relationship is over. And that period of time after the relationship is over is when they do their healing. So it really fucking sucks for the anxious person to have to wait till the breakup to go through the misery, the pain, because the fearful avoidant doesn't experience much pain at the end of a relationship from my perspective. I'm just merely speculating this. I have no proof on this. And by the way, all of those other attachment theory people, even if they're therapists, a lot of this is just anecdotal conjecture. There's no real scientific proof on this. I don't buy it, because giving people questionnaires to fill out as if this is going to give you the real data, human beings gaslight themselves. It fascinates me when I witness so many of my clients that fill out the love attachment test and they come up as secure when I know for a radical fact they're anxious, because we humans can gaslight ourselves. By the way, forget gaslighting other people. We are notorious for bypassing our own shit, okay? Okay, so my theory is, and it really fucking sucks, if you're an anxious person, you're with an avoidant, they're actually doing a tremendous amount of healing because you're giving them all the love that they never really got in childhood, and then they reject it. And then you have to go through the suffering pain afterwards. It's a shitty deal. This is why I teach vetting processes. By the way, this is where my coaching comes in. There's a link below to schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. And I'm going to share something as soon as this portion of it's over that will illustrate this at a very dramatic effect. Now, I shared with you women and the resources. Let me just touch upon something. I know of a woman who recently ended a 10+ year relationship because her emotional needs were not being met. But this relationship provided security. It wasn't a husband and wife, they were engaged, but it provided security. And she opted out of security to pursue a relationship where there's a true emotional and spiritual connection. And the man literally found a girlfriend 3 months after the relationship ended. Can you believe that? 3 months. It's been 6-8 months since this relationship ended. And so, again, avoidant men can be and the reason why they don't chase you is because they're wounded. And now I want to talk about this piece of they won't chase you is you have to, the real tricky part is after the hunt piece. Now, many of you have been indoctrinated to believe men love the hunt and men love the chase. Well, men chase sex. They hunt sex, okay? This is where, it's interesting because an avoidant man can be very charming and romantic, okay? But you see, we've been conditioned that romance is the entry point to sex. See, I believe romance should be reserved for those in a relationship, not as an entry point to a relationship. So what happens with the avoidant man is right after that he's got the sex, he stops being romantic on an emotional level, and he reverts back to his fear of being able to open up. So what's the antidote to all this? What can you do? I think is a great question. I think it's important to identify the type of relationship you want. Do you want a transactional relationship, or do you want a co-creative relationship with more depth to it? Because most transactional relationships, coming back to the 5 love languages, acts of service. Do you know acts of service in my mind is just simply a transaction? I will do this for you to get something from you. I am saying something that's going to piss off a lot of people, but I think acts of service, while it can be a demonstration of love, I think it's oftentimes part of a transactional component of relationship. Because if you're missing the heart, in other words, the words, the expression of love, if you're missing the heart, it's not a very fulfilled relationship. It's just transactional. And so what do you do about it? I'm encouraging you all to be an advocate for your needs. First, you have to identify what needs do you want out of a relationship, and then learn how to be expressive of your needs. And one of the things you might want to do as a couple, ladies, the minute the penis goes inside the vagina on a regular basis, you have every right to advocate for something greater than a transactional relationship. And so I invite couples to do workshops together. You know, interestingly enough, I think if you're not familiar with the work of Alison Armstrong, she wrote a book called The Queen's Code. I've been to several of her workshops, and she teaches women how to understand men. But she also does workshops for men how to understand women. And if nothing else, it just creates a dialogue about what needs should be addressed in relationship. To some degree, John Gray does this, and I'm not a big fan of the whole, it's all about the testosterone and men need their cave, and just focus on the men and their testosterone. And women just have estrogen, so women act irrational and men go in their cave. I mean, it's good to understand some of these basics, but what's really needed is effective tools to express one's needs in a relationship. Frequently, I talk about the book. I just interviewed my friend Sabrina Rising the other day, but we talked about the book Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. This is all about learning how to advocate for your needs in a relationship. Here, I'll put that book up again. By the way, this should have been titled Compassionate Communication. Again, all the books I recommend are listed below. Oh, before I go any further, I highly recommend getting my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? A Journey of Personal Development, Self-Help, and Spiritual Work. It's a link below. Called selflovethebook.com. Can someone write that in the chat box? See, if you're with a man unwilling to go deeper connection, because he's only focused on the transaction of a relationship, do you really want to be in a relationship where it's just an exchange of duties? Is that really the right man for you? If you're following my channel, I'm here to encourage more spiritually, emotionally based relationships. I'm not here to advocate what I believe the red pill community, that whole sexual marketplace is all. Think about the word sexual marketplace. It's a fucking transaction. Now, look, I get the dating marketplace is a mess out there. It's not fun. I'm experiencing with you. I get it. It is not fun. But I'm here to encourage every one of you that you actually have the power to get exactly what you want. Now, ladies, since my audience is women, I'm going to tell you something. Many of you are very naive to understanding what you truly desire. I witness this with women all the time. Jonathan, I know what I want. I know what I want. I know what I want in a relationship. And yes, I'm mocking women, so please forgive me. But when they go through my coaching program, it amazes me how many women say to me, oh my God, why didn't they teach me this in school? Why didn't my parents teach me this? Why didn't I learn this before I dated or married the wrong guy? Having clarity. And let me be clear about something, because I am guilty of exactly what my clients say. I didn't learn what I really wanted, particularly until my most significant relationship ended. Now I have crystal clarity that I didn't have before. Sometimes we have to experience what we didn't get to learn what we need in relationship. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? Please let me know. In fact, I hope this conversation, Avoidant Man over 40 won't chase me, is because they're deeply wounded and hurt. But what's most important is your own individual empowerment. It doesn't matter what the man does. What matters most is what you do. And I invite you to all stand in your sovereignty going forward. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? Please let me know. If it is, post a comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts. As always, if you find value in my videos, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of new videos. And if you want to connect with me directly, there's links below to schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. There's a link to join my group called Midlife Love Mastery. There's a link to follow me on Instagram to get all the books I recommend listed below. All right. Those who know my live format, it's time for Q&A. Yes, my little kid comes out. If you have a question, write the word question in the chat box and then post the question thereafter. Or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. All the monies from the super sticker, super chat goes to a scholarship fund in the name of my son, Connor Aslay. There's a picture of him right there. He's my son who passed away over 6 years ago. And in his honor, I donate to causes like the Hoffman Process, Insight Institute, and scholarships to coaching, just to name a few. Our goal today is $50. I'd appreciate some love. If you feel like I've given you value, then hit that little dollar sign and donate tonight. All right, while we're waiting for questions, I have a personal share with everybody. So recently, I got a couple messages on my YouTube channel. I'm pulling up one of them while we speak. One of the messages effectively said, Jonathan, you constantly talk about your insecurities and flaws, which tells me you're a hot mess and shouldn't be coaching. You lack strength. Why would any woman want to date you or take advice from you? For gosh sakes, you're not even in a relationship. And then someone went on to say, you're a great guy, Jonathan, and give solid advice, but you sound like a victim in all your videos by constantly vomiting your own unhealed trauma. It's so repetitive. You need to become more confident and empowered. So I want to give everyone, this, I pondered this question. I think it's very valuable. I think it's an important to address this, because I am a person who gives advice out in the dating marketplace, but I think it's important to understand my motivation and what I'm all about. So when I began first coaching, I simply started helping women improve their dating profiles. That's how I got started in this business 15 years ago. I saw a niche in the dating marketplace to help women improve their online dating profiles. This was right after I went through a divorce and I found myself in the dating marketplace. And at the same time, I started to give women advice on dating divorced men, because I was a man who went through divorce. I went through alimony, child support, visitation rights, family court, child support, all those things. So I started to give some advice from an emotional perspective of what I thought men going through divorce in their 40s were experiencing. And then I started to realize that a significant percentage of men, myself included, were radically broken at this point in their life. I was a hot mess. I absolutely own that I was a hot mess. And I share from that perspective because I believe that from coaching, and I have over 20,000 hours of coaching women, I've witnessed every time they talk about a man, they're talking about a guy who's a hot mess. And I began formulating my own thoughts. And as I started to do personal development, self-help, and spiritual work, and since that time, I've amassed over 3,000 hours of workshops and trainings. I've come to realize that, well, let me backtrack for a second. When I was 47, I met a woman and I fell in love. This is the second woman I fell in love with. But I was a broken man when I fell in love with her. So I couldn't show up as in my sovereignty in this relationship. But I gained so many lessons from this experience. All the while, I'm talking about helping women improve their dating profiles, helping them to understand divorced men, helping them understand broken men. And as I started to do more work on myself, really peeling the onion, doing the Hoffman process, doing insight seminars, going to therapy, as I said, amassing over 3,000 hours. By the time I hit my 50s and fell in love again, I recognized that I have evolved as a person, but really my coaching is to be a self-love advocate. This is, by the way, I just want everyone to understand, I use the dating and relationship conversation to trigger the most important thing I believe every human should experience in their life is self-love. That's what I'm an advocate for. And nothing triggers our shit like dating and relationships. Oh my God. I at least in my mindset, I believe, dating and relationships trigger our gigantic wounds in our lives. And so I'm a coach to empower good emotional or healthy emotional maturity, healthy relationship skills. That's what I'm an advocate for. And yes, I use my own insecurities and flaws as a guinea pig to encourage introspective work. See, it's not a flaw or not a weakness to be introspective. In fact, it's probably the most courageous thing an individual can do is not only to be introspective, but more importantly, and I believe this because, and I'll just take what Brene Brown says, one of the most courageous thing a person can do is to be vulnerable. And vulnerability for me is like breathing. It comes easy to me. And ladies, one of the reasons why some of you appreciate me is because you're thirsty for a man who can be vulnerable, authentic, and transparent. This is just breathing to me. So I believe I'm not weak, as this one woman said. I feel like that's an empowerment. And to demonstrate this a step further, many of you have been watching me over the last few weeks talk about a woman that I began dating for a couple times. And let me just say something. We had amazing chemistry with one another. The sexual chemistry was off the charts. And while we didn't have sex, I got to tell you, that desire was there from the very first meeting. And yet I walked away from the relationship. I walked away from pursuing a relationship. She checked all the boxes. There was intense chemistry, but something major was missing. There was a difference in values. Now, this has nothing to do with morality or ethics. Okay, values have nothing to do with morality or ethics. That's an important component within values. But we were misaligned in one of the most important values I have for me and where I'm at in my life. And why I'm sharing this with you is I think that I finally have evolved to a place that I could walk away. By the way, do you know how hard it is for a guy to walk away from great sex? I'm going to tell you, I'm a horny son of a bitch. Okay. For me to say no tells me I've evolved immensely. Why am I sharing this? Is because I'm inviting you to evolve past your programming. I'm inviting you all to rewrite the scripts, all of the bullshit, red pill, sexual marketplace scripts, transactional scripts that exist today, and write your own journey, write your own story. And to be empowered is to walk away from the temptation of going down the road with a misaligned person. And quite frankly, you guys aren't aware of this. I've done this twice in the last 3 weeks. I've walked away from something like this. I believe, because what I want to be an example of for all of you is to be in your sovereignty, to be in your power, to be in that space that says, I want a sacred partnership. I want, what's the name of the book? I want a spiritual sacred partnership. I want something co-creative. And it's going to start from the very first date. It's going to start with radical honesty. It's going to start by laying your cards on the table. And it's going to start by establishing your standards and the rules of engagement. This is what I teach in my private coaching. And I love it because clients call me all the time. It's amazing. They make investment in themselves. And I get calls, Jonathan, I met a great guy. Jonathan, I met a great guy. Jonathan, I met a great guy. And they finally know the difference. So to those people that think I'm weak, to those people that think I'm worthless as a coach. Yeah, I got married once. I know what marriage is like. I've had 2 significant relationships that didn't work out. Do you know what I know more than anyone out there is what most of you are experiencing out there? I understand it at a visceral level. I can empathize at this level, and I'm on the same journey as you. And I look forward to the day that I say, and I can do a video with her right here saying, hey, she is the one. And let me tell you how our journey began. I look forward to introducing her to all of you. May not happen this week. I kind of hope it does, but if it doesn't, that's okay. Because you know what's most important is your own individual sovereignty. And that's my invitation for all of you. Is this sinking in? Is this resonating with you? Please let me know. All right. Debbie wants to remind us all, it's raining great men. I had a friend of mine that said that to me. Stacy says, yes, JA is walking the talk. So proud of you. Thank you so much. Debbie says it's refreshing to hear a man's point of view. Jerry says you're strong. Sharon says this is resonating. I appreciate that. Annette Paul says, I'm here learning about relationships because I want a stable, living, I'm assuming loving long-term partnership, and I want insight how to get there. Many coaches have their own styles of expression. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Oh, JHK says, for what it's worth, I'm a counselor and I endorse you. You give some sound advice. Thank you so much. All right, are we time for questions? I want to see if any questions have popped up since the last time. Debbie says, excellent, true, and candid advice and lessons. You're truly helping me to help myself. Exactly. I'm here to encourage everyone. I just offer perspective. My invitation is for you to take what feels right for you and to use what feels right for you and to go from there. Ellie says, well, I guess they expect Jonathan to be perfect. No one is perfect. I love how raw Jonathan is. I appreciate raw. Thank you for not being fake. You know, perfect is the last thing I am, believe me. All right. Weird Fish has a question. I found a great guy who is willing to apply the 8 dates with me, and we share the values of trust and commitment. My question is, what else should we look for before we get into a relationship? So, folks, if you're not familiar with what she's talking about, she's referring to the book by Doctors John and Julie Gottman called 8 Dates, okay? It says Essential Conversations for a Lifetime of Love. Now, here's some of the chapter headings. Addressing conflict, sex and intimacy, work and money, room to grow. It's called family, and that's really family and friends. Play and adventure, growth and spirituality, and dreams. So for those that I shared previously about 2 women that I went out with, or have connected with, I should say, let me backtrack. I cut through the bullshit. I'm like, look, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. Okay. Are we on the same page? I mean, before ever getting, now I'm going to share with you, I got on the phone with that first woman I spoke to you about before. And I misinterpreted being on the same page. This is something that can happen because, you know, the thing about chemistry and the sex drive, boy, can that blind you? Can that blind you to a lot of things? Chemistry is such a fucking powerful drug, that dopamine that gets released in your body. And so I misinterpreted something. It wasn't until I was like, in other words, when I wasn't in her presence and I really could process away from I'm telling you, the pheromones, the hormones, all of that, testosterone and estrogen and dopamine and serotonin, all that shit is like a fucking chemical cocktail of cocaine. And so it wasn't until I could pull back from it to recognize where we were misaligned with one another. It's important to look inward and really ask, do we share the same values? Do we share the same values? And believe it or not, folks, I am all about blasting that shit before the first date, during the first date, or after the first date, because God forbid chemistry takes hold. Oh. It's what happened to me in my last relationship. Chemistry took over for me. It took over for me. I stopped being objective. And I'm grateful for the experience. That's the other beauty of life, is that life is meant to be experiences for individual growth, if you choose it to be. And so anyway, just want to share that with everyone. Thank you so much. All right. Actually, I got another question that came in, so I'm going to read from that. I got a question in earlier. Jonathan, I'm noticing that there are men who stay in relationships, but they're not in love. And are they capable or fearful of being vulnerable? And I went on to say, is love and commitment the same thing? You know what's interesting to me? I've been having some new awareness around the idea of loving someone versus being in love with someone. Loving someone versus being in love with someone. I believe the difference between the two. I think men and women can love another person because they admire and respect the other person. They admire and respect the other person. Hopefully. I think that's what love is about, admiring and respecting the other person. I think in love includes that desire for that other person that's coming from a true place of desire. Now, just recognizing that getting off, just basic sex, is a biological need. That doesn't represent desire. Just getting off there's a deeper desire, like I desire this person beyond the physicalness. But more importantly than desire, I think in love means I'm all in. I'm all in. For better, for worse, sickness and health, I'm all in. That's what in love means to me. I'm here. You matter. We are important. I've got your back. I'm not going anywhere, and I only want you. I believe that that's the difference between loving someone who you can respect and admire. But when the in love piece is something deeper than that. And so men can stay in relationships where they love a woman, but they're not really in love. And it's one of the reasons why men can nest in a relationship, because they're oftentimes coming from a place of codependency. They just like a warm body in their life. Men will settle for mediocre relationships once they're in. Think about it. Women initiate 75% of divorces because they don't want to settle for mediocre. Men will absolutely settle for mediocre, but you get inundated with, Jonathan, men are commitment phobic. Well, it's only the broken men or the players that are commitment phobic. Well, actually, that's not true. Well, yeah, that is true. But I will say broken men will stay in long-term relationships, okay? Broken men will stay in long-term relationships. Just be aware of that. So commitment and love, in my mind, are two radically different things. Power of Chi says being in love is a choice, but I think it's a choice of desire, and it's a choice of, it's like, you know what? I want you despite our differences. I want you despite our differences. Can you answer the title question in more than one sentence? Again, why won't a man chase me? It's simple. After the sex, they're incapable. I'm sorry, this is a one sentence answer. They are oftentimes incapable of emotional intimacy, and they will settle for nesting in a relationship. That's why he won't chase you. And what you do about it is you advocate for your needs, and if they can't meet your needs, you move on. I mean, that's the simple answer to it. You don't need much more than that answer to it, in my opinion. Beach Lover is in. By the way, I would appreciate some donations to the Connor Asley Scholarship Fund. And if anyone wants to join me on the Hot Seat Live, I just posted a link right there. Beach Lover is in the house. Question. Women's chemistry is different, isn't it? I find that after sex, I can think clearly, but before I can't think clearly, but before I can. Does that sound about right? I'm just thinking about, there's this phrase called post-nut clarity. Power of Chi has just posted that. So for men, when we're on the hunt for sex, we think irrationally, and after we've ejaculated, we think rationally. And it seems to me, based on what you just said, is you think rationally before sex, and the minute you have sex, you think irrationally. There is this belief that oxytocin plays a part of that. I think there is some truth to that, but I also think women bond on an emotional level. And so I don't think it's always sex that women bond on. I think they bond through an emotional connection with a person, not always physical connection. But also, remember, you might be bonding in an unhealthy, insecure love attachment way might be the reason why you're bonding. Or you could be bonding based on the imago. If you're not familiar with the work of Helen Hunt and Harvell Hendricks and Helen Hunt, Getting the Love You Want, you will definitely want to study the imago. This is oftentimes where we choose a partner, we subconsciously go seeking out a partner that's similar to one or both of our parents from an unmet need in our childhood. It's one of the reasons why women are attracted to emotionally unavailable men, because they had an emotionally unavailable father in their life. So I would want to study your patterns and then work actively on changing those patterns going forward. Okay. HK says, I've learned that I've settled so much of what I didn't want because of just attraction. Never again. Look at, I'm an example of that, folks. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to walk away, particularly as a man, to walk away from what could be great sex. You know, oh my God, I can't tell you how, you know, it's interesting how many women I've spoken to over the years, their relationship ended. And I asked them, was he your best friend? Like if you can't answer, like, and some of you have this fantasy belief that they are your best friend. By the way, best friends break up in a conscious uncoupling. If they end a relationship, it's always a conscious uncoupling. It's usually two people agreeing that this doesn't work for them, in my opinion, anyway. Let's see. I don't think, let's see. Annette Paul says, I don't think being in love is a choice for me, unfortunately. I'm in love with a man which does not desire all-in relationship. We had great connection outside of it, including physical. Okay. Well, I mean, again, my perception of all-in, or excuse me, in love is where you are desirous of those person and you are all in. In other words, being in love. I do believe unhealthy attachment and insecure attachment can feel like in love, okay? Or the imago can feel like in love. So it's oftentimes, from my perspective, when a person thinks they're in love, it's because it's coming from an unhealthy place. Because when two people are in love with each other, they live happily ever after. Unless something changes, they live happily ever after, at least in my purview. When two people are in love with each other and they're aligned in their values and their emotional maturity and their relationship skills and their lifestyle, when two people are in love with each other, it's going to work out. It's only, by the way, usually most people believe they're in love because they're in an unhealthy or insecure attachment dynamic, or they're in a fantasy. That's the other thing. They're in a fantasy of what love is. Oh my God, we human beings can so gaslight ourselves believing something is love based on pure delusion. It fascinates me. I'm sorry to laugh. It's not a laughing matter, but I've just witnessed this within individuals. Okay, if you have a question, write the word question and post the question thereafter, or you can purchase a super sticker, super chat. There's a little $ in the chat box. I'd appreciate some love. Another question came in before I recorded this video. It said, would you discuss the difference between men who love a woman and I already just did that. And a woman, and then, and that part, wait, something about infidelity. Why, I guess the question was, why would a man claim they're in love with a person and be unfaithful? Because their love for the other person is oftentimes an unhealthy, insecure attachment for a person, but they have an insatiable need for something outside of this relationship. Do you know women now actually are unfaithful at record numbers than ever before? Because most humans don't establish a strong emotional, spiritual connection with one another. They oftentimes find themselves in transactional relationships And there's a significant percentage of women who are unfaithful in relationships. Some are because they're thirsty for emotional connection. There's no doubt about it. But there's also this egoic, entitled community or demographic that's growing out of this because they're not really partners with the person that they're in relationship with. That's just my observation anyway. So this is just some of the things we're faced with. Hey, if anyone wants to join me live on the hot seat, I just posted a link as well. Let's see what else we have here. Catherine says, yes, loving and in love are different entities. I love, appreciate, and respect my ex-hubby, but while we're not in love with him, he's a great friend. Yes. I love, it's interesting. I love my ex-wife. She was a fantastic mother, or she is a fantastic mother to our children. She did all the heavy lifting. I have a great deal of respect and admiration for her, but I'm not in love with her. Thankfully, we have reached that level of being family to one another. Okay. We treat each other like family, and we're in each other's lives because of our children. I think if we didn't have children, we probably wouldn't be in each other's lives. But because of that, we step up to something greater than ourselves, even though we had differences and even though we were misaligned with one another. But I believe that's what love is all about, especially when you can treat each other like family. So anyway, I agree with Catherine in that particular case. Let's keep going here. Jahilia Ford says the definition of love is so subjective. Yeah, that's rather true. Because we all have a different interpretation of what it is. Melissa posted the following. She said, I just had this experience. It's painful. I was in love, but he cared for me. He didn't see a future with us. When I asked him to consider moving in together, he broke up with me. So if he was in love with you, I don't believe if two people are in love with each other, you see, there's a contradiction, but he was in love with me, but he cared for me. I think what you're really saying is he cared for you, but he wasn't in love with you. He didn't see a future together, so you were misaligned on your values or your lifestyle or your emotional maturity. And the minute you put together the desire for something deeper, he ran. Well, by the way, sadly, and I know this is painful to hear, he did you a favor. He did you a favor. Because now you can go after a person who's aligned to who you are and what you want. That's just my perception anyway. Let's keep going. Debbie wants to just acknowledge as a great community here, we are all growing with you, Jonathan. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, let's see what other questions we have here. By the way, if you don't pop some questions out here, it's going to be hard for me to continue, and I want to get to an hour here. So post something. Give me something to work with, ladies. Here we go. All right. Annette Paul just posted a question. Been dating new man for 3 months. He has a female friend that he seems to adore. He asked me on a date and invited her to our date. I felt hurt. I'm insecure, or was he out of line? So I mean, we could look at this in a couple different ways. He has someone, by the way, if this was his sister, would you feel hurt if this was his sister? See, what's the difference between a female friend and a sister? Why is that? Why is there a difference? Now, is this a female friend that he had sex with? Okay, that might be something to be curious about, but why? This is really, I felt hurt. I am insecure. So you've owned I'm insecure. Was he out of line? I don't think he was out of line. He asked, he invited her. Now, I guess the question is, did he tell you in advance that he invited her? Now, I'm assuming you've been dating for 3 months. So this isn't the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth date. This is 3 months. And he wants to introduce you to somebody that's important in his life. So if you feel insecure, you may want to examine what is your insecurity. In other words, and now you could say, do we have enough trust between the two of us? Maybe there's an issue of trust. Now, I read that you say I'm unsure of her motivation, then different than a sister. Well, again, you're unsure because you're making up a story of what his motivation is. Okay. You might want to investigate how they know each other. How long have they known each other? You can find out more about their relationship. Now, the idea of finding out more is so you can build more safety and trust. I understand that need for you, but you really have to examine your insecurity first, because a sovereign, secure woman is a person who's in their sovereignty, a person that loves themselves, isn't threatened. Now, you might feel threatened because the two of you haven't built enough trust with one another. I understand that. By him introducing you to his friend, he's demonstrating, like he's introducing you to someone in his life. That's a pretty good thing. He's demonstrating trust. Now, if he shares now, it could be that she's his confidant. I have a very dear friend in my life. We met through a dating site 19 years ago. Okay. We never kissed. There was we just went straight to the friend zone with each other. And for the last 19 years, she's my therapist. She's my confidant. She's been there for me when my son passed away. I was there for her when she was going through a major breakup. I actually even counseled her and her previous boyfriend while they were going through some troubles. I did couples counseling for them. Okay. She's a dear friend in my life. I introduced, both my last two relationships, I introduced this friend. Thankfully, the women I were with are very secure in who they are. They didn't feel threatened by that because I was upfront about my relationship with this person. So I guess my point is you have to build trust with one another. You have to work on your own security, and there has to be transparency. Those are just some of the ways that I've interpreted your question, and that's the way I look at it. By the way, someone wrote that 3 is a crowd. I disagree with that 1,000%. By the way, that's like saying anytime you invite your guy friend, if a guy invite his guy friend to introduce his girlfriend, that's called love. That's called inclusion. That's called integration. Life is better than just two people when you can incorporate your family and friends. It's one of the key foundational pieces to build trust when you introduce your family and friends. My last relationship, I introduced her to my oldest and dearest friend on our 4th date because I was proud to show this person off. I was proud to show my partner off to him, and I was proud to introduce him to her. Whether it's a man or woman, we've got to let go of this narrative that there's something nefarious when it's opposite sex. My closest and dearest friend on the planet today happens to be a woman more so than a guy because guys aren't very good at emotions. Women can be much better, at emotions. So anyway, that's just my perception on all of this. And again, it was 3 months into a relationship. This wasn't on a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th date. Okay. He should have planned a group dinner, not a date. I guess I met her before. By the way, now you're trying to qualify it. Okay. I just don't. Okay. You already know my point of view. I don't think it's a big deal. I think you have to examine your insecurity around this. Now, if he's demonstrated mistrust, I can understand that, but it doesn't sound like he demonstrated mistrust. And again, I think perception makes all the difference here. Now, I understand he didn't tell you in advance, okay, if that's the case. Guys are sometimes just stupid and clueless too. Most men are good guys. Most men are good guys. I mean, you've been dating him for 3 months. You should get a sense, is he a good person or not? Okay, now Spiritual Warrior says, forgive the red flags, Jonathan. Most of us have dealt with narcissists with triangulation games. Oh my God. You see how dysfunctional is out? I want to maybe give the benefit of the doubt to this guy because you've been dating him 3 months. Yes. This is all the bullshit things we have to face. I get it. But I'm just giving you my perspective on this. Stacy says, we don't own or control anyone, including our partners. People should be allowed to be themselves, but if it's up to us to communicate our concerns and boundaries, yes, 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 yes. That's all this is about. Express how you felt. I'm sorry, I didn't say this earlier. If you felt a certain way, just express how you felt. Just express how you felt. How he reacts to that. And by the way, if you express how you felt in an attacking way, you're going to get a defensive response from him. You know, I was a little confused that you didn't let me know in advance that you were going to invite a dear friend. I'll be candid with you. I felt a little insecure because you have a female friend and we haven't really talked about this. So is this something we could talk about it? Come from a place of curiosity, not an attack, and just express how you were feeling from a place of curiosity. Okay, this will be our last question of the day. Jonathan, how many men over 40 actually seek your help? You know, not enough. There's no doubt about it. Not enough. I tried to start a channel for men. I've kind of I've been laxed on that because I think I'm encouraging women to be empowered because I think women are can be the emotional containers of a relationship. So by the way, everything I've learned in my life came from a woman, not a man. So that's why I'm encouraging women to open up the floodgates in other words, not give their power away to men, but most importantly, because I think women can be the catalyst for men's growth. So that's the reason why I do that. All right. Hey, did this conversation resonate with you? If it did, post a comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts. As always, if you find value in my videos, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of new videos. And if you want to connect with me directly, schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with a coach is right for you. Join my group called Midlife Love Mastery. Follow me on Instagram and get all the books I recommend in my dating vows listed below. All right, I'm going to wrap up this video as I always do. First off, give myself, by the way, I want to give Brian some props. Brian says, we men are here, just stay out of the chat. Okay, see, there are men here. Anyways, I want to wrap up this video as I always do. First off, give myself a big, gigantic Jonathan Barrick of self-love. I'm going to reach into the camera and give you a hug of love if that's okay. I'm going to ask you to turn to someone, a pet, a teddy bear, a pillow. Give it or them a hug of love because hugs are a great source of love. And let's face it, we could all use more love in our lives. I want to thank Elena and Jeanette and Beach Lover and Debbie and Power of Chi and Brian and did I say Annette? Annette, Jahilia, Stacy, Spiritual Warrior, Jerry, Catherine. Oh my God, that's a name I can't even pronounce. Can I pronounce that name? Not even close. Patricia, Ariel. Everyone, big hugs. Thanks so much. Wishing you a super duper wonderful day. Be well.